me warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words, and never stops at all, and never stops at all, and never stops at all. Thank you very much. And this second poem is by my very favorite poet, my very dear partner, Jennifer Burd. It's a poem that she wrote, and I set the music. And it's about a flower that's about to come out in the spring. While you were away, I picked a bouquet of forget-me-not, forget-me-not. The night you were to come home, I could no longer see the blue I knew had been there. Ah, forget-me-not, 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 forget-me-not. Then you came home and our hands trembled like the slender stalks of a forget-me-not as we remembered each other over and over. We remembered each other over and over. We remembered each other over and over. Forget-me-not, 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 forget-me-not.
Laszlo Slomovits and Jennifer Burd from Ann Arbor. Laszlo has been coming to this event for a long time, and one of our favorite musicians. Debbie introduced me to his work almost 40 years ago. So, our next storyteller is Gregg Eisenberg, I'll give you the story of how we found him. Miranda, who's a professor at Richmond University, found Gregg's book, gave it to her brother Todd, who at that time was in Washington. Todd read some of the parts of the book to me in Ohio. And I called Gregg in Colorado. And here he is in Alley Park. His book is a collection of all original one-line aphorisms, or laugherisms, as he calls them. The book is entitled Letting Go is All We Have to Hold On To, Mind-Altering Jokes. And it was #2 in the humor category on Amazon. According to Gregg, in the bathroom reader category, it was only a #1. The material is both funny and challenging in a way. His one-liners challenge a lot of conventional thinking and challenge a lot of the way we commonly use language. He's asking us to challenge ourselves, I think, to take our search for truth a little further. I also appreciate the overall geometry of his humor. He's like a balloon maker at the circus, taking ideas and twisting them into new shapes. Some of them are like Mobius strips that turn in on themselves as they circle around. And these laugherisms, which he calls the Eisenberg principles, are like modern Zen koans, pushing us a little closer to, well, I guess we'll find out soon. Gregg, please join us.
Greetings, everybody. I'm usually really scripted in my presentations, but I'm going to go crazy today. I'm just going to take it as it comes. We're together. That's great. I want to start with a poem I wrote when I was 19 years old. And it's actually never been written down, but I've always just remembered how it goes. Until now, of course. I'm a poet of dreams, but my mind, so it seems, is rigid in structure and weak in the seams. I'm an author of prose, but my pen, as it flows, misuses its word forms and smears as it goes. I'm a singer of tales, but my voice, as it fails, stutters in rhythm and confuses its scales. I'm a man of high lesson, but my soul in each session of trying to express itself is lost in its expression. So, wow, what is going on with me at 19? Like, I gotta go back and look at my journals. That's heavy duty. But it was kind of prophetic because in the end, I did write in the course of my life a book of poetry. And I am a poet of dreams. And I hope I get to share one. If I can do any time management tonight, I may be able to share one. And I did write a book of songs. I am a singer of tales. And my voice probably will fail if I try to sing one. And this is my book of songs that I finally just published. And I am an author of prose as well. This is a children's book that I also just published, based on a poem I wrote when I was 13, which I think you'll have to come to Boulder in 2 weeks to hear if you want to hear it. And the book of which Alan spoke and which Miranda gave to her brother Todd, who then gave it to Alan, and who then called me in Colorado, is this book. It's called Letting Go is All We Have to Hold On To, and it is, in fact, a book of jokes about us, about human nature, about how we roll, the games that we play, the mind games that we play with each other and on ourselves especially. So I'm definitely going to be reading some, I have to read some of this or they'll kill me out back, so I don't have much choice on that. But I want to tell you a story, a little glimpse into how I got here and who I am and why this ever even got written. And this was an idea that was suggested to me, by the way, on the way over here today. So thank you very much for that suggestion. When I was 17, before I even graduated college, I went with my brother to Europe, and we had a Eurail pass. He had just graduated college, and I was a little bit of a wild child, but it seemed like to my parents, maybe a good idea. They were soon going to find out the meaning of trouble. So before cell phones. We lost each other in Austria, and he shortly thereafter headed back to the United States, and I continued south to Italy, and then kind of went down to Greece. And I thought, now it's getting interesting. I thought Europe was boring. It was too much like America. I was from the suburbs of Chicago. I wanted real life. And I started getting it in Greece, and then I went into Turkey, and I spent 2 months in Turkey, and I met my first girlfriend in Istanbul, and she was an American, also an American Jewish girl. We decided we were going to go to the Holy Land, but not fly. You could get on a flight from Istanbul to Tel Aviv and be there in probably an hour. I'm guessing we'd say an hour and 6 minutes. That's my guess, maybe how long that flight is. I'm usually pretty good at that stuff, by the way. But we were going to go overland and follow the old Roman highway, which we did do. So we went through Cappadocia. We were the only people in Cappadocia. We would hitchhike. A car would come every half an hour. It was cool. It was really cool. Wow. And we had our visas for Syria and Jordan, and so we traveled through the Turkish-Syrian border. I have an amazing story. You'd have to come probably, I don't know, you'd probably have to come to Mozambique in October to hear that one. We spent 10 days in Syria lying about who we are to people. We're American Jews. That would be bad to be caught in Syria. That was cool. I wouldn't do that right now anyway. But and we traversed right through where the earthquake happened, and we know those cities, and we have friends from back then, and so our hearts go out to them. And friends in Syria. Went into Jordan, spent 10 days in Jordan, hitchhiked around. The guys in the truck were teaching them, she'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. They didn't speak English, we didn't speak Arabic. Had a great time, entered Israel over the Allenby Bridge. The Israeli people were full of dust. At that time I told my mom, by the way, I'm a poet, anything else is extra. So, writing poems, because I was writing poems the whole time. Entered Israel, lots of things happened. Before, about 3 or 4 months later, I found myself in the old city of Jerusalem, where I was picked up by some Orthodox Jews and said, hey, do you want to really learn what this is really all about? And I was reading the electric Kool-Aid acid test, and I was like, sure, man. A place to stay, meals, edifying, learning, teaching, getting to know history. It sounded good to me, free food. So I stayed there. I ended up joining what they call a yeshiva, and it's a place where it's a Jewish school where you study Jewish stuff with a lot of Jews, and that's what we were doing. And while I was there, and I was kind of younger, I was on the younger side, there was a lot of Canadians and South Africans, and they were all like 22, 23, I was kind of 18, and one day, we got the news that Yasser Arafat, who's the head of the PLO at that time, had been injured and maybe even killed in some type of battle. I think he was in Jordan at that time. There was a battle in Jordan. And the other yeshiva guys were like, woohoo, Yasser Arafat was just killed. And I'm not saying I had a right to have an opinion on the subject, because I'm young, and I don't live there, and I don't know shit, let's face it. But I thought, are we supposed to be celebrating, that somebody, even if it's somebody we don't like, got murdered? Isn't there a different vibe we're supposed to take? It just didn't seem right to me. And they're like, oh, no, it's okay, hey, the guy's trying to kill him, hey, you're allowed to celebrate. And I'm like, no, I don't know, I'm not buying into it. I was already, I will admit, on their bad side for bringing a non-Jewish Norwegian girl into the men's dormitory and getting caught with that a few days before, so I was kind of on the outs with these guys a little bit anyway. And they said, no, they go into the Talmud and they go, when the Red Sea crashed on the Egyptians, the Israelis were on the other side going, Kumbaya, Malo, and Kumbaya, and they were singing and celebrating. That was okay. However, you look in the Talmud, you got to go kind of all in. The angels, there was an angel that also celebrated, and God said, no, you can't celebrate. You know, the angels can't. Humans can. It's, hey, we're human. You're going to celebrate. You got, you know, somebody's trying to kill you. They get vanquished. You say Kumbaya. It's okay. I thought, you know, I don't know. I didn't know what to think. I was a little sleep deprived. So my Norwegian girlfriend and I went out to get dinner the next day at a Chinese restaurant in the Arab quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. This is going somewhere, I promise. Okay. So we had, I don't remember what we had, okay, probably fried rice. I don't even know if they had pork buns, but, you know, probably. Come on, I'm not going to have pork buns. I do have, you know, values. No, anyway, so at the end of the meal, I get a fortune cookie. Fortune cookies are usually pretty, not that interesting. You're going to make $1 million. You're going to know the meaning of regret, trouble, either one. This one was by somebody I'd never heard of. I didn't even know how to pronounce it. It was some guy, Lao Tzu or something. I'd never heard of him or anything, but what the quote said was, and you may have to go to South Africa in December to get the answer, but I'll give you those dates. So now I'm going to read from it. Okay, I'll tell you what it said. It said, conduct your victory like a funeral. Okay, I'm going to let that sink. I'm getting chills. Are you getting, like, did you get that? I got it, yeah. Conduct your victory. And I thought, whoa, this is the kind of wisdom I'm looking for. Like this, I am literally getting chills right now just remembering it. And that's the only fortune cookie I've ever remembered. I got that, and it was like, okay, that I knew I had to get out of there. And they would pressure me, this is going to be the biggest mistake. The guy with the hair lip was saying, this is going to be the biggest mistake of your life. And he was from Canada. You got to stay, you got to do this. I stole away in the night. We went down to the Negev desert. Lots of other things happened. And eventually I went back to the United States, and I went to university, and I went to Indiana University in Bloomington for a couple of years. And I will say that in my second year there, I found this teacher, Judith Berling, who was wonderful. She danced while she talked, and I feel like I should do that too, actually. But she was a teacher of Taoism. And I got exposed to this whole other way of thinking about the world that was so refreshing to me after just growing up in the United States and, you know, kind of in the 80s. And that's around the time I wrote that poem. So lots of ideas, lots of things happening for me when I'm 19. Where did I want to go with that? So one of the stories, oh, by the way, when did we start?
I don't know.
8:32, so I have 11 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to skip a few things. Because I want to spend time with this book. I do. I was hoping I could share a little bit from everything here. Maybe I'll end with a poem. But, you know, in Chinese restaurants, at the end of the meal, you get fortune cookies. In Jewish delis, you get misfortune cookies. I had to stick that in somewhere because, anyway, so it turned out to be kind of an important fortune cookie because I eventually grew up to be kind of, I don't know, I'm on my way to becoming a fortune cookie writer. You know, because these are all one-liners, right? And so I've Googled misfortune cookies, by the way, and there's a book called, but they hardly have any reviews. It hasn't done anything. So I think there's room for a new player in this sector, you know. So I am going to be the mad fortune cookie writer. But this book, I started just joking around with, you know, I stopped writing songs when I was 34. That was it. Stuff stopped coming out of me in those kinds of chunks. I couldn't write a good song now, you know, to, you know, save the Ohio River Valley, you know, I couldn't. But I started writing jokes, and it's good. You move to different formats, you grow, you change, your mind is kind of consuming and processing information differently. So This is 16 chapters of original fortune cookie material. I don't know why I'm standing here telling you I should be starting my new company, right? Misfortune Cookies by Gregg Eisenberg. But I want to read a few of these to you. But these have a kind of a Buddhist, Taoist flavor, but there's also Western philosophy and like I was saying last night, there's a lot of honesty in this writing. I'm really, with each joke, I'm just trying to chip away at the truth of who I am, and like there's some things I don't really want to admit, but they are part of who I am, and they're part of all of us, but none of us really want to admit those things. So it's kind of like, it's healthy to laugh at ourselves, and so these jokes give me better visibility over myself, and that's why I wrote them, and eventually it became a book. Letting go is all we have to hold on to, and that's how I got here tonight, and I want to share a few of them with you. Oh, did I not even bring those other notes up? Oh, here they are. Jerusalem, California. Oh, I'm not saying that yet. I eventually went out to California, by the way, after Indiana University, and I got a degree in Chinese language and literature from the University of California in Santa Cruz. And not a very practical degree, because that was too long ago. It's still too early. The Chinese aren't coming that fast. You don't need to know Mandarin. They speak English anyway. But I did study that, and I'm glad. I got a good background in other ways of thinking. Okay, so here are some jokes, or what I call laugherisms from the book. I'm a free spirit, but I'm raising my rate soon. I hate being self-employed. The staff is lazy and the management sucks. Oh yeah. My identity crisis is clearly what my life is all about. And I'm glad that one comes across. That's good. You guys are good. You're working with me. I don't compare myself to other people nearly as much as some people do. This is the oldest you've ever been, the youngest you'll ever be, and the least medicated I've seen you in quite a while. Your premature reactions are welcome here, but just a little bit later. Succumbing to peer pressure is totally frowned upon around here. There's absolutely no dignity there's absolutely no honor in trying to defend your dignity to others for anything more than 4 hours a day. I kind of want to see who laughs at that one. Because they're all telling, because they're all about you. If I were you, I'd be a lot more like me. I truly look up to all people who see everyone as their equal. You're a terrible listener. Oh, did you get it? I didn't mean that. Actually, that was weird. You're a terrible listener, but I bet you hear that all the time. Which goes with, I'm a great listener. I love to hear myself talk. I used to think I was making something of my life. Then I thought life was making something of me. Now I'm hoping for either. I want to genuinely apologize now for how insincere I'm going to turn out to be later. Let's see. Wanting English to be the official language is certainly the zeitgeist of the times. It's all but a fait accompli. It's going to be a long week at work. They put me on the paradigm shift. I love that. My search for the truth came to an abrupt end when I realized there is no finality. Let's stick with that one for a second. Because actually, I'm not just trying to get laughs. When I want to know what I think about something, I try to write a joke about it. And what about truth? Because the mind is endless. right? There is no finality, but you have to keep searching, or I don't know. Anyway, my search for truth came to an abrupt end when I realized there is no finality. My life is in transition now, but that's about to change. I used to hear voices. Now they only text. My inner critic is talking so loudly, I can't even hear what my dad's saying. Let's just admit we're basically ignorant and stop acting like a bunch of fools. I'm totally irreverent, but only out of a deep sense of respect for everything that's sacred. This is my life, you know what I mean? These are like, I have plaques of these. I should get tattoos. Like, this is what I do. If the suffering of humanity doesn't make you weep like a baby, then you're no man at all. Just a few more, and then I don't know how I am on time. Does anybody know how I am on time?
You're on time.
Oh, great, good. I should do a joke about time. I have something. I've made a full-time job over getting over myself. If you were just a little different, you wouldn't need to change it on. Selective memory worked well for me 5 out of 5 times last week. If we only knew now what we're about to find out. I love that you're so dynamic, and I hope you never change. I'm right on the cusp of accepting that there's nowhere further to go. I'm right on the cusp of accepting that there's no... It's so true. It is so true. I'm almost there. There's just a couple more from the book. Thich Nhat Hanh said, Buddhism teaches us not to run away from suffering. But what about from the IRS? The idea of ownership is a complete myth, but you should still hang on to your receipts. Life is not a popularity contest, friends. If you agree, please like, comment, and share. Big Brother isn't watching me, at least that's what my Google searches are showing. Well, I think I would like to, I'm a holographic mirror of the cosmos, looking at the moment for a good deal on snow tires. I'd like to end with a quick poem, about a 1-minute poem from my book called Love Without Madness. It's in English and Spanish. Amor sin la cura. I'm going to do it in English tonight. But come to Mexico City in January and you can hear the Spanish. I'm going to do the poem Make a Home for Your Soul. It's deep. I don't know. It's something that we have to do here on this plane, I think. Make a home for your soul on these limestone cliffs where ants carry away the remains of a lifetime. For this is where the invisible hand has led you to try to hear the voice of the sea turtles beneath the agitated waves. Make a home for your soul beside these withered vines where snakes feed on mice. For this is where the porcelain dragons that now guard your doorstep will be shattered into pieces. Make a home for your soul in the dark of your room where the quiet is disturbed by words never spoken. For these words never spoken lead down a dark staircase to an underground cellar where they turn into wine. Make a home for your soul on this bed of dark roses, where longing gathers on every petal. For this is where old friends part ways, and the wisdom of events consummates new beginnings. Thank you all for having me. Have a namaste. Thank you so much. I'm humbled to be sandwiched between these great storytellers and musicians, and I feel like a deli meat all of a sudden. But I'm excited to hear our last speaker tonight, Bill. And shall I just introduce, or I've just met Bill.
Wait,
nope.
Okay.
Make a home for yourself. No. Bill and Paul Lepp are Swiss pharmacologists who raise orphans they find regularly in the Peruvian Amazon Delta, and are so proud of their oldest son, who has come a long way from his very humble beginnings, Will.
Costume change there. Greg, you're not the deli meat in the sandwich. You're the fortune in the cookie. Ooh, yeah. So I grew up in a little tiny town called Half Dollar, West Virginia, and we had two streets, in case you weren't here last night. One was called Main Street, the other one was called that ain't Main Street. And at one point, we got a Chinese restaurant that came to town, and we were so excited because it was the first foreign restaurant that we had in our county ever. And the owner was a guy named Hank, and I'm gonna throw these to you. Will you please catch it? Sure. And Hank was Chinese, like ethnically. Like if you traced him far enough back, you'd find out that eventually some of his ancestors had come from the Ming Dynasty to the United States. Probably got here before my family did. So he was as American as apple pie and xenophobia. But people there in Half Dollar, West Virginia, because we were a pretty white community, they thought he was a foreigner because he looked like a foreigner, but also they didn't think he could speak English because he had an accent. And he did have an accent, so you would hear people in my little town say, that fella's got an accent, right? They would say their accent, that's what the joke you're missing. And he did have an accent, because he was from Boston. And so, because he had an accent and didn't sound like he spoke proper English, some people in town thought that he was a foreigner, right? I try really hard in my stories to promote West Virginia and to sort of dispel the stereotypes that people have about us. But to pretend that there aren't any morons in West Virginia, I mean, it's just not true, right? I don't know where you're from, but you have a legislature too. And so I'm not going to tell you this whole story, but some people in town didn't like Hank because he was a foreigner. And one of the people in town that didn't like Hank because he was a foreigner was Lester Gwynn. And Lester Gwynn was a local minister. Now here's what you need to know about Lester Gwynn. Lester Gwynn only had one eye. And this is why Lester Gwynn only had one eye. He got drafted into the Army in the 60s, late 60s, and he went to California, and he was stationed out there, and he was driving down a road beside the beach, and he was looking at the sunset and the ocean and the women in bikinis, let's be honest. And then he remembered he was driving, because rear view mirrors started to bounce off this side of his car, and he was going down a line of parked cars and just smashing all of their mirrors. And when he realized that, he went like that, and he went all the way across the road, and he hit a dump truck. And that's when he remembered he'd been eating, because he'd been eating a corn dog. And it went in his eye, and he got discharged from the Army medically, and he was bitter because he wanted a Purple Heart. And so he was mad and he was poor, and so he headed back across the country to West Virginia, but he didn't have much money. And so he went into a bar, and the guy sitting there, he got a glass eye, and the guy sitting next to him said, "Have you ever heard the joke about the guy who had a glass eye and went into a bar and bet somebody that, you know, he could, $10 that he could lick his own eye?" And Hank said, or Lester said, "No, I haven't heard that joke." And so, you know, the guy takes his eye out and he licks it. And Lester could have been offended by that, but instead he saw a career opportunity. And he worked his way all across the country, going from bar to bar, making $10 licking his own eye, until he got back to $half West Virginia. Well, we only had one bar in the entire county. We don't call it Dry County for nothing. And so in about 3 days he was out of work, and so he did what a lot of people do when they're out of work. He decided to become a pastor. We hear a lot in the Christian world, you know, Jonah was called by God and he wasn't fit to be a pastor, and Paul certainly wasn't fit to be a pastor and he got called by God. And so people read that and they think, oh, God is calling me, I should become a pastor. Well, let me just say something. As a former pastor, that comparing yourself to Paul, I mean, maybe you are called, but just check. Because comparing yourself to Paul is sort of like comparing Kim Kardashian to Helen Keller, because they both learned how to talk. And the thing about Lester is, and this isn't the story I'm telling you, so don't get too into it. The thing about Lester is that he had never read the Bible. I mean, old or new. He just started a church, because again, you see it all the time. People do, I'm going to start a church. And other people are like, well, he started a church, I'm going to go. That's a funny thing. This is a new part of the story that I'm not telling you. But we have a lot of educators in our lives. We have a lot of teachers, and so we think each teacher, maybe they each have something different. We don't just read one book, we read lots of books, and we find out lots of books. For some reason, we have one clergy person, and we tend to think they're right. They might not be. So, he had these wonderful church services that we love to go to, because first he would make mistakes. He talked about how Jesus suffered under Pontius Pilates. But then he would take out that eye, and he would hold it up, and he would say, this is the eye of the Lord, and it's watching you, and he would roll it down. Then he would talk about how foreigners are coming to get us, right? Because if you have a church, it wasn't really a church, it was just an organization, and whatever these people had, it probably couldn't spread to humans. But if you are part of an organization that calls yourself a church, and your whole idea is that somebody else is coming to get you, okay, we lived in $half West Virginia. The bad guys aren't going to fly over Manhattan, over D.C., over Pittsburgh, over Morgantown, $2.50 to get us. They're going to stop in one of those other places. But Lester needed a reason to, so he hated Hank because Hank was a foreigner. But he really liked the Chinese food. Because, but he thought that he told his congregation that there were demons in the buffet food, that Hank put demons in there to infect good white Americans. So every Sunday after church, before the Baptists could get there, they would go and they would circle. Lester and his church would circle around the buffet, and they would hold hands and they would pray to exorcise the demons. And then they would eat the food to see if it worked, right? Because you want to hate the sin, but love the dinner. And Hank, this is how this is relevant and why I'm not telling this whole story. But Hank had this wonderful trick. I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you take a fortune cookie, see I'm tying in, if you take a fortune cookie, you wrap that in a damp paper towel, put that in the microwave for 15 seconds or so, it will soften up and you can open it. And you can take the fortune in there out, and you can write your own fortune and put it in there, seal it back up. 15 seconds later, you can deliver it to people. And because some people in town thought Hank couldn't speak English because he had a Boston accent, they would say things around Hank that wasn't only not Hank's business, wasn't their business either. And so people would get fortune cookies, and the fortune would say things like, your wife knows. by Mongolian monks who lived in the Andes. And nobody bothered to not believe that, because we believe things when we hear them. And so, anyway, one day, Hank had enough of Lester. And so he passed him a fortune cookie, and then it said, you don't know anything about the Bible, and Jesus doesn't love you. And Lester got really mad, and he left. And I'm not telling you this whole story, but we were in the restaurant, I don't know, probably 3 months later, with Sheriff Hasbro. Sheriff Hasbro was the law in our community, and a robber came in. A robber came in, and he had a paper bag on his head, and he demanded the cash. And we all looked at Sheriff Hasbro because he was the law. And Sheriff Hasbro was just like, yeah, give him the cash. And so, it was a small town, so Sheriff Hasbro knew where everybody was going. He'd just go get you later when it wasn't so tense. And so Hank gave the robber the cash, and then the robber ran away. And we all turned and looked at Sheriff Hasbro and said, you know, why didn't you stop that man? And Sheriff Hasbro said, I didn't have to. I know who it was. And Hank said, how could you know who it was? He was wearing a mask. And Sheriff Hasbro said, oh, it was Lester. And Hank said, how could you tell it was Lester? And Sheriff Hasbro said, because he only cut one hole in the body. But I'm not telling you this story. I'm going to tell you a different story. And this starts now. People ask me all the time, how did you learn to tell stories? Well, I grew up in a family where the truth was fluid. It held the shape of the vessel that contained it. It was always, still is, in my family, totally fair. It is always up to the listener to decide what is true. We're not trying to trick you or manipulate you. It's just sometimes it's more fun to not tell the truth. And the master of this, as far as my generation goes, was our grandfather, Großpapa. It's German for great father, has nothing to do with his personal hygiene. And Großpapa, because this is a story, could talk. And like your horse, come on, it's a throwback. We're going to have to work here. We got a ways to go.
Sorry, Dad.
Yeah, sorry, Dad. It's okay, son. If your joke had been better, mine would have gone over. So Großpapa would say things like, he would tell a story like he and his buddy, he grew up in the Ukraine, they were German Mennonites, but he and his buddy would be riding their horses down the road, and they saw a woman being accosted by a man, and Großpapa's buddy jumped off the horse and saved the woman. And the next time I heard that story, Großpapa and his buddy were riding their horses down the road, and a gang of men, 10 men, were accosting a woman, and Großpapa and his buddy jumped off the horse and saved the woman. And the next time I heard that story, Großpapa alone would be riding down the road, and the entire Red Army was attacking a woman. And then Großpapa told me that he rode with Lawrence of Arabia, which I believed. I was probably 7 when he told me that. He was in that part of the world at the time. He spoke 6 languages. It made sense to me, and I believed that till I was 14 years old, and I told that to a reporter who put in the paper that my grandfather had ridden with Laurence Olivier. So we have that going for us now as well. And then Großpapa would say things like, do you see that restaurant? And I said, yes. And he said, that is the worst restaurant I have ever eaten at. Every time I go. So this was the world that I grew up in, with Großpapa saying things like this. And fortunately, I married into a similar family. When my father-in-law had worked for the Forest Service for like 40 years, and then he died, because that's what happens. And we were at the funeral, and somebody said to me, how old was Glenn when he died? And I said, we don't know. But when everybody leaves, we're going to cut him in half and count them. Totally acceptable in the Gordon family as well. So this is the world I was born into. It's like my buddy Andy has his Aunt Marguerite. When Andy was a little kid, he went to the creek. He had a 5-gallon pickle jar. He caught a whole bunch of tadpoles. He put it on the front porch, put a lid. Every day he would come home from school and watch the tadpoles. And Aunt Marguerite came over and said, Andy, what are you doing? And he said, I'm watching my tadpoles. And she said, what are you watching for? And he said, I'm waiting to see them turn into frogs. And she said, how long is that going to take? And he said, I don't know. And she said, do you know how to speed that process up? And he said, no. And she said, what does a tadpole have that a frog doesn't? And he said, a tail. And she said, what does a frog have that tadpoles don't? And he said, legs. And she said, that's right. If you take the tadpole and push the tail in, the legs will slide out. so I've never bothered to check the veracity of my grandfather's stories or Aunt Marguerite's stories or my father-in-law's stories. I just believe them because that's who I am. And that's who we are, really. When you boil it down, we are the stories that we've been told. And if you don't like those stories, tell a different story. But my mother-in-law thought that she was interesting. She thought that she was Native American and African American and like Creole, traveler, I don't know what all, Roma, I don't know what all she thought she was. So she was going to take one of these DNA tests. I told her, I said, Paulette, don't do it. And she went and she did it. And she found out that she is 97.8% Northern European. And no offense to about 98.7% of you, but there is nothing more boring than 97 point. I said, I don't know, Paulette, maybe you suffered ethnic leak. But anyway, this is the world I grew up in. But when I was a little kid, I was little. I mean, I didn't break 6 feet or 100 pounds until I was a sophomore in high school. I was a little kid. And to top it off, I was bad at everything. Now, when you went in my sister's room, my closest sibling in age, when you went in her bedroom, all on one wall was nothing but blue ribbons from the swim team we were on. The entire wall, with an occasional red ribbon thrown in where she had been on a relay team, forced to be on a relay team, with some weak sister who was never seen again. And then on another wall, there was nothing but trophies, and they were not. Your parents paid $25 for you to be on the team trophies. They were most runs batted in, most baskets scored. When you went in my room, on one wall there were 3 ribbons, and they were pink. And they didn't say disqualified or last place, but that's what they were. And this one year in about July, I figured out what I wanted to be for Halloween. I was going to be a Rice Krispie box. And so I got a full big box and I cut a hole in the top and I spent months painting it to look like a Rice Krispie box, snap, crackle, and pop on the front, entertaining but educational games on the back, nutritional information on this side, the recipe for Rice Krispie treats on this side. And when it came time for Halloween in our school, we were going to get to wear our costumes to school, and you could win best of class and best of school. And the night before the contest, my sister asked me if she could wear my costume to school. And in a fit of generosity, I said yes. And she won best in class and best in school, and she would not give me the ribbons. And I tell you that to tell you this. Her name is Katie. And she lives in Dayton. Okay, so if you see her, just give her the eye. So, and then we were studying the water cycle in our science class, and we learned all about how the sun shines down on the ocean, and some of that water evaporates, and it goes up into the sky, and then it sort of recondenses into clouds, and those clouds blow out over the land, and they get heavy, and then the rain falls out of those clouds, and they go into the creeks, and the creeks refill the oceans. And when it came time to do our science project, I decided I was going to do my science project on the water cycle, and so I got the bottom half of a turkey roaster, and I filled that half with water, and I got a terrarium, which is a fancy word for an upside-down fish tank, and I put that over the tub of water, and I got a little stand and a hair dryer that I could turn on, and I could blow hot air into the tub of water, and that condensed or evaporated some of the water, which would then condense on the top of the terrarium, and I made a seascape. And when it came time for the night of the science fair, I had my little index cards, and the judges came over, and I read my report, and I said, and then the rain falls back into the ocean, and I bumped the table, and the condensation fell from the top of the terrarium into the turkey pot, but the hair dryer also fell. Oh, no. And the lights went out in the county, and I didn't win. And so I would go home and I would cry because I felt bad for myself. And again, I'm the last of 5 children, so my mother just didn't care. That's not true. She loves that joke. She would come in my room and she would say, "What is wrong with you?" as compassionately as possible. And I would say, "I'm little, I'm bad at everything, I'm no good, there's no way I'm going to change the world." Now, I don't know why I thought at 7, 8 years old that I needed to change the world, but you know how you get fixated on things when you're a kid. I said, "I'm never going to change the world." And she said, "Listen, honey, most people who changed the world didn't set out to change the world. They were just doing something that they either kind of wanted to do, dreamed of doing, or just needed to do in the moment. And then because of those actions, they changed the world. So then she would start rattling people off, like Martin Luther, and then I'm just going to jump up to the present age, Rosa Parks, and then people like Neil Armstrong and Chuck Yeager, who were just following their dreams. They didn't necessarily think I'm going to be the first man on the moon. They just wanted to be pilots, and then they wanted to be astronauts, and so they just kept following it, and they ended up changing the world. And she said Harvey Milk and Freddie Mercury, and my mother did not say Harvey Milk or Freddie Mercury. I wish that she had. She said they were just living their lives, and you know, that changed the world. And I don't know if it made me feel better, but I know it made me fall asleep. And so it worked. Now every summer, my entire family would go to Islesboro, Maine for vacation. And in order to go to Maine for vacation, we had a 16-foot Grumman aluminum canoe. And Dad would take all of the family gear and he would pack that into hefty bags and he would seal that up and lash them into the canoe. And then Mr. Koski would come over and Dad and Mr. Koski would go to either end of that 16-foot Grumman canoe full of all of our gear, lift it up, turn it over, and put it on top of our Grand Safari Pontiac station wagon. And for the young people in this room, you don't know what a station wagon is. Just imagine a minivan that's lower and cooler. That car was at least as wide as this room. And when Dad and Mr. Koski put the 16-foot Grumman canoe on top of that car, it did not stick out over the windshield or the tailgate. That's how big that car was. And the reason we had to put all the gear in the canoe is because in that car, going for 21 hours from Half Dollar, West Virginia to Islesboro, Maine, in the front seat was my father, my mother, and Grosspapa. In the next seat, the bench seat, the back seat, whatever you want to call it, was my brother Paul, my Alma, that's my grandmother, and my brother Kevin. And then the back half of that car, there was the back seat, and then there was just this wide open area. A station wagon is called a station wagon because it was built to take steamer trunks from the station or to the station. And so there's just this wide open area. I'm not kidding, like 8 feet of wide open space, 8 by probably 6 maybe. And my mother had put a 1-inch foam pad back there. And in the back of that car was my sister Tammy, my sister Katie, myself, my buddy Skeeter, and the dog. There were 10 people and 1 dog in a car that had 4 seatbelts. There were more cigarette lighters in that car than there were seatbelts, and they weren't phone chargers. And so the 4 of us and the dog were back there where no one could touch us, even if anybody cared, and they didn't. No one looked back, and if they did look back, they couldn't reach us, so we did whatever we wanted to do. We played a game. Dad would roll down the tailgate window. The window was that wide, and we would play a game called Who Can Be the Last Person to Leave the State? On my ankles! And the people behind were like, honk, honk, those kids are having a good time. That's a wholesome family. And then we stopped at a rest stop. And you know how it is when you're on a long trip, one person has to pee, everybody has to pee. So we all got out of the car, and I was the last person to get back in the car, and instead of climbing over everybody, I just rolled in that tailgate window, and I made eye contact with Dad and Grosspapa in the rearview mirror, and I was tired, so I pulled a blanket over my head. We pulled out and started down the road. Now, Kevin and Tammy had switched seats because Kevin tended to get car sick, which means he would lean out the back passenger window and decorate the back fender of the car. And Dad got tired of that, so he put Kevin in the back so he could just decorate the cars behind us out the big tailgate window. So Tammy had moved up, and we got about 15 miles down the road, and my sister Tammy said, oh no, I think we left Bill at the rest stop. Because that's how it is when you're the last of 5. It takes 15 miles for anyone to notice you're not there. And Grosspapa said, I told him if he didn't hurry, we were going to leave him. And my father said, we'll pick him up on the way home. And my mother said, John! And my dad said, what? I'm sure he'll be fine. And my mother said, John! And I have to tell you, I was 18 years old when I realized that my father's name was John. Thought there was some sort of accent mark in there. And then we went another 20 miles till my sister was hysterical. And when I popped up and I'm like, I'm here. Oh, it's great. And finally, we got to the end of the earth where the ocean started. settler, we needed to get to an island, so we got on a ferry boat. And it was a huge ferry boat. And you know, you can park like 20 cars on this monster, and they chain them down, and then while you're crossing the bay, you can get out and look at the ocean. And so Gross Papa was standing there with his arm on the railing, looking. Me and Skeet went over, and there were all these brightly colored things floating in the water. They were lobster boobies, but I didn't know what they were. And I said, Gross Papa, what are all those brightly colored things floating in the water? And he said, oh, those mark the places where all the other ferry boats sank. This is the man, I don't think he invented this, but this is the man who told me that ice cream trucks quit playing music when they're, or play music when they're out of ice cream. And so, you might ask yourself, why would you ask that man anything? Well, by the time I realized that he was always lying, I realized he had the best answers as well. So finally, we got to Islesboro, and we drove off the ferry, and then it was like a 7-minute ride to the cabin. It's just this little cabin, and we got out of the car, and there was like the cabin, and then, I don't know, maybe 25 yards of yard, and then a little path, and then 50 yards of rocky beach. And my parents said to me and Skeeter, because we were at that age where we were more help if we weren't helping. They said, you two, let's make us 7. You two 7-year-old boys, you two go. You two go play in the ocean. You two go play unsupervised in the North Atlantic Ocean. Go. Because safety hadn't been invented yet. And Gross Papa was of an age where if he didn't want to do something, he would just say, I'm not going to do that. And so he said, I'll go watch the boys, which would have rankled, except we knew he was just getting out of work. So Skeeter and I ran across the yard, ran down the little path, ran across the rocky beach, and into the ocean, into the North Atlantic Ocean. I don't know if you've ever been in the North Atlantic Ocean, but even in July, it is 8 degrees colder than the bottom of Lake Huron. By the end of that trip, I was blue from the knees down. And then I was pale white from my knees to my waist where my swim trunks were. And then I was lobster red from my waist to the tie. I looked like one of those patriotic rocket popsicles. So Skeeter and I went running into the North Atlantic Ocean, and we came running out. And Gross Papa said, was it cold? And we said, yes. And he said, well, you have to acclimate yourself to the water. And we said, what do you mean? He said, well, you got to go out there. Once you're in the water for a little while, your body get used to it. You won't even know it's cold. And we said, how do you acclimate yourself to the water? And he said, well, you got to go and you got to totally submerge yourself. You got to go all the way under. So we ran out and we dove down to the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean, and we came back out, and he said, are you acclimated? And I said, I don't think so. I'm still cold. And Gross Papa said, well, did you open your eyes? And we said, no. And he said, well, you got to open your eyes to acclimate yourself. So we went out into the ocean. We dove beneath the water. We opened our eyes. We popped out. We came back. Gross Papa said, did you open your eyes? I said, yes. He said, what happened? I said, it burned. And he said, yeah, it's because it's salt water. And Skeeter said it was dark. And Gross Papa said, yeah, that's because the light can only penetrate so far into the ocean. It can only go so far down. He said, if you go deep down into the ocean, no, there's no light at all. And Skeeter said, wait a minute, hold on 1 second. He said, I can go to the city pool. I can see all the way down to the bottom of the deep end. That's 10 feet deep. And Gross Papa said, yeah, that's because that's fresh water, but this is salt water. And salt water is more buoyant, so the light can't get down as far. It floats. Because it's light. And Gross Papa said, if you go deep enough, there's no light at all. You go deep down in the ocean, there's absolutely no light at all. It's so dark that creatures, they have to make their own light. They're bioluminescent creatures like lightning bugs, but they're in the ocean. He said there's one fish, it's called a lanternfish. It's got like a light post coming right out of the middle of its forehead, got a light on the end so it can see where it's going. And we said, how deep down do you have to go to see a lanternfish? And Gross Papa said, you got to go deep. You got to go, I'm talking like 6, 7, 8 feet. And so Skeeter and I ran out into the North Atlantic Ocean, took a deep breath, dove down to the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean, out onto the rocks, opened our eyes in the burning salt water, and waited for lanternfish to swim by. And this is why you should lie to children, because a good adult can manipulate a child into enjoying themselves under the most miserable conditions. And when we couldn't breathe breathe anymore. We went out and we stood on the beach shivering in front of Gross Papa. I told you I was little. I could go hypothermic standing in the Sahara Desert at noon holding a lukewarm soda. So Gross Papa let us stand there and warm up for a while. And he said, "Are you feeling warmer?" And Skeeter said, "Yes." And Gross Papa said, "Uh-oh." And Skeeter said, "What do you mean, uh-oh?" And Gross Papa said, "Well, they say that you start to feel warm just before you freeze to death." Love that man. And then he said, "Look, there's this creek right here." He said, "What you guys ought to do is you ought to build a dam on this creek. You build a dam on this creek, and then a pool of water will build up behind that. The sun will shine down on that. That water will get warm. And you guys, it'll be like a hot tub. You guys can go get cold in the ocean, then you can come and you can sit in your hot tub." And so we did. We built a dam. We spent hours building a dam. It was probably 8 feet long and probably 3 feet tall. A beautiful crescent and a beautiful pool of water built up behind that. And we sat in our hot tub. And my mother called us for supper. And we went up and we ate dinner and we played games and we went to bed. And Skeeter and I got to sleep on the screened-in porch. And you're all old enough to know. But if there was a small child was here, I would explain this to them. I'm going to explain it to you anyway, like you're small children. If you are a small child and people keep telling you how lucky you are because you get to do something, you are being manipulated. Because if it was that good, the bigger people would just move you. So they put us out on the screened-in porch, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but Islesboro, Maine, in the mid-1970s had the most, not per capita, the most werewolves and axe murderers wandering through the woods. And so every time we heard a noise, we thought they were coming, and to prove we weren't scared, we told each other scary stories. Finally, 4 o'clock in the morning, because we had, 0.78 millimeters of steel separating us from the murderers. And finally, at 4 in the morning, we fell asleep, and at dawn, Gross Papa was out there. "Boys, boys, boys, wake up, wake up." I said, What? He said, "Look." He said, "I think you broke the ocean." I said, "What are you talking about?" And we looked out, and sure enough, whereas yesterday the beach had only been about 50 yards to the water, now the water was 75 yards away. And we said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Do you know anything about the water cycle?" And I was like, "As a matter of fact, I do know something about the water cycle. Sun shines down on the ocean, the water evaporates, it turns into clouds, blows out over the land, the rain falls into the creeks refill the ocean." Gross Papa said, "Yeah, that dam you built on that creek, you stopped the flow of water into the ocean." He said, that's a tragedy right there. He said, because first of all, if the ocean drains, I mean, just think about the loss of sea life. The seals are going to die, the whales are going to die, the porpoises are going to die, the seagulls are going to die, the mackerel, the dolphins, the horseshoe crabs are all going to die. He said, besides that, if there's no water in the ocean, there can't be any transatlantic shipping, so the economy of the world's going to crash. There's not going to be any rain, so, there's just going to be a tremendous drought. Everybody's going to starve to death. And I was like, "Gross Papa, there's no way humans could cause that much climate change." And he said, "You guys need to go down there and tear down that dam, get the water flowing back into the ocean." So we did. We ran down, we tore down the dam, the water started flowing back into the ocean. And Gross Papa said, "Now you two hide behind this log right here. I'm going to go get us some breakfast, and then we're going to sit here. I'm going to sit here, you're going to hide, and I'm going to watch to see if the ocean police are coming." He said, "They're masters of disguise. You don't know if they're in a shrimp boat or a sailboat or a rowboat. You just got to watch. And, I don't want you two to get arrested by the ocean police." So he went up and he got us our breakfast and we ate it. And we'd only had 2 hours sleep. And then, the adrenaline was flowing away. And now our bellies were full and we fell asleep. And I don't know how long we slept. But Gross Papa finally woke us up and he said, "Boys, boys, boys, I think it's working. Look." And sure enough, the water was back about to where it had been the day before. And he said, "I think it's working, but let me ask you something. Did either of you notice exactly where the water was yesterday?" And we said, "No." And he said, "Well, I think it's a little further up than it was yesterday. You might be letting too much water in." And that's a problem, because if you're letting too much water in, then the state of Maine is going to flood. And the state of Maine is north, and everybody knows that north is up. And if you flood Maine, all that water is just going to bottleneck right down through New England into the greater United States, down into Canada and South America. He said, "You guys got to get that water flowing exactly like it was yesterday." So there we were, 2 7-year-old non-hydrologists trying to get the flow of the stream back. And my mother called us for supper, and we went up, and we ate dinner, and we played Yahtzee, and we went to bed, and at dawn, Gross Papa woke us up. "Boys, boys, boys, it didn't work." And we looked, and sure enough, the ocean was back to where it had been yesterday morning. He said, you must have cut off too much water. All I can think of, maybe. He said, do you know anything about displacement? We said, no, I'm not going to explain displacement to you, but he did. He said, maybe if you throw enough rocks into the ocean, displace enough water that no one will notice that it's draining. So we went down and we threw rocks till we couldn't move our right arms, and we threw rocks till we couldn't move our left arms. We kicked rocks into the ocean, but it was working. The water was coming back up. It was rising ever so slowly, and Gross Papa said, I think you put too many rocks in the ocean. You need to build a seawall. And so there we were down at the ocean building a seawall along Islesboro Island to stop the flooding of the ocean. And we heard someone coming behind us, and we turned and we looked, and it was my parents. And you might be asking yourself, where have they been for 2 days? I don't know. And my mom said, what are you doing? And the emotion came pouring out of me, and I said, we broke the ocean, we broke the ocean. And my dad said, oh no. We better hide you out in the basement until the ocean police come. And my mom said, John! Dad said, what? Then we can stow him away on a ship to Timbuktu. And my mom said, John! And Dad and Gross Papa walked away giggling. I don't know if I need to tell you that Gross Papa was Dad's dad. And Skeeter and I we were in tears. We were so exhausted and we were sore. And it was just, it was just miserable. We were just in tears. Mother knelt down and she put her arms around us, and we were looking out at the ocean. And she said, listen. She said, there is no doubt, and it's indisputable, that the two of you are good at breaking things. She said, but I don't even think you two could break the ocean. She said, you don't know anything about tides, do you? I grew up in West Virginia. Freshest seafood I ever had as a kid said Starkist on the side. Didn't know anything about tides. So she said, 75% of the water is covered in the ocean, and there's the sun and the moon, and both the sun and the moon their gravity pulls on everything on the earth all day and all night long. And the sun is more powerful because it's so much bigger, but the moon is closer, and proximity is power. And every day, as the earth spins around the moon, or as the earth spins in the moon's gravity pulls on everything. And the only thing that really moves, actually everything moves, but the only thing we notice that moves is the water, because it's fluid, and it pulls the water this way, and it pulls the water that way. So every 12 hours, you have a high tide on one side of the earth, and a low tide on the other side of the earth. My mom said, that's all that's happening here. The tides are coming in, and the tides are going out. She said, listen, she said, the ocean is almost indescribably more massive than the two of you. She said, and the potential energy of the ocean is just, again, there's no way I can begin to tell you, except that there's all these forces that can act on the ocean. A hurricane can blow the ocean, and the waves can go in, and the winds and the water can go in and just flood, an entire country. Or there can be an earthquake on one side of the country, and a tsunami can wipe out a country on the other side of the ocean. Or the frigid air can freeze the ocean so quickly that it just smashes a ship right there in the ocean. And I was like, how is any of this supposed to make me feel better? She said, you're not listening. She said, the ocean has the power to change the world. But you two are actually more powerful than the ocean. Because for the ocean to change the world, another force has to act upon it. But the two of you, as small as you are, can decide to change the world. And then she turned and walked away. And Skeeter and I stood there staring at the ocean for a moment longer. And I turned to go. And Skeeter said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to change the world. And he said, how are you going to do that? And I said, I'm going to get a hairdryer and the longest extension cord I can find. And that if it's true, is how I learned to tell stories. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me.
Did you say you had books to sell over there? I didn't hear you if you said that.
Yeah, books, Negroes,
Okay. T-shirts,
hair dryers.
hair dryers. It just so happens that I also have merchandise over there. So, you didn't pay to get in here. So, maybe stop by the merchandise table on your way out. We'd be happy to autograph Will. Will can autograph my stuff. I don't care. He's my most beloved son. My name's. So, but again, seriously, thank you guys so much for coming out. I know